that's just a catchy beat about people going to hell. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are Irenicast. I'm Jeff.
I'm Bonnie.
I'm Casey.
This is Raj.
And on the first and third Tuesday of every month,
we bring to you our perspectives
on theology and culture
from a post-evangelical lens.
Thank you for joining us for another conversation to provoke your progressive Christian imagination. This week, our esteemed co-host Alan is on assignment, and we have we're actually, while Alan is gone, we're going to be invited into a conversation that Casey and Bonnie have been having about apologist or evangelist. We'll get into what that means in a second. And for our segment, we are going to be sharing our top 3 guilty pleasure Christian songs that we still listen to, regardless of how offensive they may be, depending upon our lists. Bonnie, Raj, I'm just used to associating those two names, Bonnie and Casey, tell us a little bit about this conversation and why you want to bring it to the table here, the Irena table, the proverbial podcast space. I'll shut up. Go ahead.
Do you want to start, Casey?
Sure. So Bonnie and I had a great opportunity to drive down and spend some time with you, Jeff, and your family, and to talk about the potential for doing an intersections group. And on our way down, Bonnie and I entered into this conversation about, are we apologists or are we evangelists? And I think really what we were getting at is, are we trying to take the faith that we once had and sort of bring it back to life, right? Or find ways to dress it up like a pig, you know? Or are we looking to do something new? Are we looking to evangelize and make what we once had something new and different? Bonnie, you can take it from here, but really, I mean, this conversation was hours long, and our whole discussion about who do we want to be as people of faith, but also as leaders of the church.
I have a question for clarification.
Sure.
You're dressing things up like a pig?
Yeah, that's like an old phrase, right? Like you put makeup on a pig and it still doesn't make it.
Lipstick on a pig.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
I don't know. Drag is a pig. What? I don't know.
Drag is a pig. That's good.
Yeah. So, and we wanted to expand the conversation because it's interesting, especially when we go through the process of deconstruction. What does it mean? And we all identify as Christian. What's our Christian orientation at this point? Is it to spread good news, or is it to defend the tradition that we were given?
So is this less about the faith itself and more about the posture in which you approach it? Like either as a defensive support, I'm going to make sure that everyone knows that this is right, and anyone who comes against me, I'm going to fight against it. And then the other side, evangelist, being I want to share and invite.
I don't think so. So there are people, we won't name names, out there who are writing lots of books and trying to reinvent their faith, but still keeping with the same ideas. And I think we're saying you cannot put old wine in new wineskins, right? Isn't that's from scripture itself? But the evangelism, I think, is saying we are not trying to take the faith that we once had and make it look great and trying to find ways to justify it. We're trying to say in evangelism, we're trying to do something completely different.
Okay. Let me see if I understand, because this is really interesting. So apologists, maybe, and some of the modern apologists, maybe putting lipstick on a pig, but they're essentially defending traditional Christian orthodoxy. I think about somebody who I really enjoy, but I think falls in this category, is Nadia Bolz-Weber, and another one is Richard Rohr. They're repackaging in very innovative ways traditional Christianity and making it more accessible. So there's that one camp. And then the evangelist camp is, are you saying it as evangelists of a new brand of theology, like a new iteration of the Christian faith that may not have gotten a lot of widespread popularity? Is that how you're delineating the two?
I mean, like Jeff said, that we're expanding a conversation that we started a while back. So I don't think it's not like we're here to say this is what we're saying or what we're not saying. It's more like let's talk about this idea of evangelism and apologetics. As someone who identifies as Christian, how do you move in the world? Do you move in the world thinking, wow, there's all these theological constructs and traditions and so on that I would like to make new for a new era in a way that sort of carries on the old and defends the old? Or do you move around as a Christian with this idea that there's good news, and it's the good news that I most want to be true to?
So, and I think that we should go back to like defining good news, right? I mean, again, this is like when you hear people talk about the good news, right? I think a lot of times you're going to hear something that's wrapped up in Jesus and salvation. And Bonnie, I want you to like bring back your definition of good news from our last or the podcast that we did at the second roundtable.
Well, borrowing from Brené Brown and her work, I understand the good news to be we are wired for survival, and that is by design, like it's part of who we are, and yet we are worthy of love.
So can I just sort of frame this in an example? Maybe that would be helpful. Because Jeff, you're looking at us like lost as hell, I think. So,
so is that the agreed upon gospel then? We are wired for survival and worthy of love.
I think so.
Yes, I like that definition. So here's how I'm trying to, I think what I'm doing with my thought process right now is I'm trying to get past, I think, the words of evangelism and apologetics, right? Which both have very tainted meanings. So I'm trying to try to kind of work through this. I'm trying to think of like the heart behind those things. And if we relate it to that definition of good news, to me, we're wired for survival is exactly one of the things that's wrong with us is because we protect, we say this is ours, and then I'm going to build walls around it. And we do that with our Christian faith, right? Which is apologetics. I'm going to build these walls of quote unquote logic to defend what I know. And then when I say worthy of love, sometimes that's something that we have to go out and search, right? So it's not that we're taking something to someone, it's that we're revealing something to someone that's already been there the whole time. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Then I am on board with where we're going. And I just want for the record to say I'm going to let's be evangelists and screw apologetics.
Right. So this week I had a junior high friend call me out of nowhere and say, I want to be baptized. But this guy my age is not a church person, right? Doesn't go to church, isn't interested in really belonging to a community. And so I could feel myself going into that apologetic place. I could feel myself wanting to begin to articulate for him what baptism is, or what it should be, or what it could be. And in seminary, they teach you that baptism is something you do in beloved community, but this person doesn't have one.
Right.
And so I found myself saying, well, I could baptize you in my hot tub, and we can sit here and talk about what is the promise that you're willing to make to God. You know, what are the commitments that you're willing to make? What does this mean to you? And so we had this whole conversation about belovedness and how this act is an act between you and God. I mean, it was a beautiful conversation, but none of it was rooted in well, this is what we used to believe about baptism, and we're going to baptize you in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. You know what I'm saying? Like, what felt to me like this real element of evangelism in a way that had nothing to do with my previous context. The only thing that sort of reminded me of that was how many of our youth pastors, when someone wanted to be baptized, did it right away. It was that just inspiration of the Holy Spirit that you just dive right in and say, yes, we're going to do this now. We're not going to wait. That was sort of the only thing that felt familiar to me in that sense of like there's an urgency from this young person and I'm going to match it with the same sort of intensity. But I didn't offer the same sort of language that had been given before, or even try to go there, right? We talked about repentance as the changing of your heart and mind. I read the story of John the Baptist, and John the Baptist calling people to repent, but really that meaning just like a changing of your mind, a changing of your heart. And this young man wanting to do that for himself, to set clear his priorities. Does that make sense? Or is that
that's not making sense to me? And where I'm struggling is, and this is weird because I'm sort of an anti-apologist, but you started, Casey, acknowledging that baptism is traditionally part of a community, and I still have a connection to baptism as it's a public communal event. And what the experience that you're sharing sounds like is a personal recommitment, a way to mark a personal transition, spiritual transition, which I think is different. I don't know if I'm missing something.
I don't know if you want to respond to that, Casey, but what it makes me think of is I think just the word evangelism, evangelist, evangelical, it has, like you were saying, Jeff, it has all these layers of meaning to them and connotations. And so even for us to use the terms apologist and evangelist, we're clearly deeply rooted in Christianity. It's not that there's a complete departure from the tradition that we've been given. And I think that's why Casey even called the experience baptism, because it was still a tradition, a rite of passage, marking a new moment on the journey, on the spiritual journey for this person. But perhaps it doesn't have to be so institutionalized.
Okay. So Casey, you're maybe saying that experience expands the scope of what baptism can be. It's not necessarily eliminating the communal aspect, but it's embracing this other iteration of what baptism could be. Is that what you were saying?
Right. And that I think that's the point of what we're trying to say about evangelism in general. We have been given a great gift in our tradition, and it doesn't work anymore. I mean, some of the things that we saw once as the foundation of our testimony, the foundation of our ministry, they don't work anymore. And when we try to make them work, right, for this young person who is having this changing of a heart and mind, who longs to connect with his Creator, for us to say the only way to baptism is to take a 3-week class in a community that might not necessarily be yours, and to ask you to agree to things that maybe you're not ready to agree to, and then you can be baptized, is awful. No matter how, no matter what you put in those 3 weeks of classes or whatever, right? How hip you try to make baptism, or sharing the history of baptism or whatever you choose to do. I think what I'm saying is there is room for that, but there's also a need for us to begin to say some of this doesn't work anymore.
Right. But still using the same terminology is how do we expand those things? I feel like this whole episode, maybe, I don't know if we should work on it, like put it in the show notes, is create like an axiom list. Like here are all these words that we're using in this episode, and here's how they've been strictly used in our past tradition and even in very strict binary traditions now within Christianity, and here are some expanded definitions of what we mean by those things. Because I agree, like that this whole like concept of what you're talking about, Casey, has been like the bane of my existence, the thorn in my side, my whole ministry career, in the sense that it's been, well, this is how it's supposed to be. Okay, fine. But the heart of what we're trying to do here, it still gives us room to do this or to call it this. I can't tell you how many times in my ministry I was told, well, that's not this. That's really this. And I was like, well, screw you. Like, who cares what you want to call it or what you want to do? If I want to, it's still within the confines of what the movement of these traditions are. And it's in that same vein, right? So if it's not, like using baptism as an example, if it's not, we've turned it into, well, this is a confession to the community, which basically is code for, this is the first step before you sign your membership paper and pay us tithes, right? Like it's this institutional come to this moment, as opposed to an inviting into this new way, this new
That's right.
movement of life, this new philosophy, this new thing. And then I go back to what I said before, is I do think that part of this is a revealing. Like, I don't think that any of these things are new in the sense that they're brand new. It's just giving us new language for something that has always been there the whole time.
Yeah, I think, Casey, one of the things that was particularly powerful in rehearing what you shared is there is a conflation in many contexts between baptism and membership. It's like the two are inextricably linked. And I think that is pretty toxic. That's kind of poisonous. That really isn't the point of baptism. And I think, Jeff, your articulation was good.
Well, and one of the things that I've experienced when it comes to that is when people say unity of the church, usually what they're talking about is their church.
Conformity.
That's right.
Right, exactly. That's exactly what they're doing. So they're taking this language that's meant to be beautiful and inviting and evangelistic, and they're creating it into an apology and placing you in a certain category and institution, and then basically robbing you of all the things that are awesome about it.
Right. Well, one of the things that Bonnie and I talked about this morning when we were having breakfast was Jesus being an evangelist, right? You heard it said this way, but now I tell you the truth that it is this way, right? Whatever that thing is. We once believed this, but now we believe ... Right?
Nice.
Yeah, so perhaps the most Christian thing to do is to take a tradition that you've inherited and make it new and find the good news in it, but maybe not in a way that reforms or reframes the old, but actually unfolds into something entirely new, entirely different. So we'll need new language. I mean, we're even creating sort of a binary here by using like, are you an evangelist or are you an apologist?
Right.
Which is like an either or. And maybe we need to even think of those terms in terms of spectrum, or maybe there's a third way or a fourth way to move about the world as a Christian.
Or that we can be on both sides of that fence at the same time, depending upon the issue or the thing that we're talking about. Because, I mean, you mentioned it in passing before, Bonnie, but where does all this play in deconstruction, right? So we have all come from fundamentalist background into more of a progressive philosophy, but there are still very much fundamentalist progressives, right? Who are very like apologetic about the things that they believe and the things that they hold on to. And the only reason that they moved from maybe more of a fundamentalistic philosophy or version of Christianity is some form of logic that they determined is, well, this doesn't make sense anymore or whatever, but they're still within the same framework. They're still within the same way. It's just different clothes. And I think that that's probably something that we've all had to fight against in certain ways, especially all of us still being involved very much in traditional, well, all you now, me not so much, but being involved in more traditional church settings and seeing it on a regular basis. It's kind of easy to kind of pull the ripcord. And I don't mean this as a knock. Like, it's a legitimate movement for some people to just be out of the church. So I don't mean it as like you're bailing, you're being lazy or whatever like that. But I do mean in the sense that, are we really deconstructing? We're maybe deconstructing our thoughts and our ideas, but are we deconstructing our posture, our motivation? And I think that that's maybe not happening as much as some of us like to believe it is.
Yeah, I think you're right, Jeff. I think part of the journey of deconstruction is that you have to let it all go. And I think that's really terrifying for people. I know for me, it was terrifying to think about sort of losing everything, losing not just my own identity, but also losing my way of seeing the entire world and the way everything fits together within it. And I think too that it's hard to see that perhaps what you grew up with, even people who were well-meaning in your life, maybe they handed you something that was really bad, And it's like hard to come to terms with that. It feels painful.
Or the opposite, where I feel like it's not so much that I was handed ideas that were bad. It's that I was handed ideas that the people who gave it to me were holding it in a apologetic way, because I feel like I'm still very much all the reasons that I became evangelical, all the things that drew me in are still very much a part of where I'm at. So I wonder if it's just more of like a personal movement or something. I don't know. Maybe it's just the makeup of our Enneagram numbers, or wherever we are on that, like how we choose to approach that. Because I was taught to love people, and I have unconditionally, and that's what's all the things that evangelicalism gave me are the very tools that drove me away. And I think that has to do with maybe more of my internal posture has always been evangelist as opposed to apologist, as much as I tried to hold on to being an apologist.
Yeah. And Jeff, that loving people unconditionally is in many cases a hook. It isn't really the teaching. It isn't the core. And what happened, I think, for many of us is that idea of unconditional love is what took root in us. And then when we came to realize in our fundamentalist evangelical sectarian world that that's not really what they're talking about. They're talking about a lot of other shit, and they're using this as a bait and switch tactic. And I think for many of us, that may be the crux. It was like, you know what? This love thing is okay with me, but it ain't really happening here. So I'm going to see if I can find it happening elsewhere. And that prompted some movement out.
Well, I think, I can only speak for myself, but that unconditional love ended. There wasn't an unconditional love. There was a
Right.
promise of unconditional love. And then when I came out, that was the condition. That there was the line, right? Even though it was clothed with, we still love you, but we hate your sin.
Mm-hmm.
That's not love, right? That's not love. And so I think that even in, going back to what I was saying earlier, like in this baptism thing, it wasn't hopes that you'll join my church, hopes that you will tithe to my congregation, or, it was, I want to honor where you are because I love you. And I know that, that God loves you. And leave it there, right? Just leave it there.
Yeah, that's cool. But I'm wondering, and this is going to sound like a crazy tangent, but Casey, I know you and I are both fans of Orange is the New Black.
Yes.
And so, there's that one season where there's the storyline of, and I can't remember the inmate's name, the character's name, but she's like, those are kosher meals? Those look really good.
That's right.
And
that's right.
she wants the kosher meal too. And then they're like, you're not Jewish. You don't know anything about Judaism. And she's like, well, let me check it out. I'm going to meet with the rabbi. And she goes through this process and then ends up like, where there's this great episode where they've found a hole in the fence and she finds this pond and goes through this mikvah on her own. It's like
yes.
but it was rooted in those conversations with the rabbi on this journey to get better prison food. But then in that pond, if you haven't seen the episode, watch the series just for that one episode,
right.
because it is absolutely magnificent. And I think that's a great illustration of what you're talking about, Casey, is it's got elements that are part of established religion and faith, but then you break out and it's a personal encounter with the divine that then sets you on a new path, which happens in that case. And I think those that witnessed it as viewers and followers of the show, it did something to us too.
Right. And I think that this is why this conversation is so important for our listeners, is I think it's a re-invitation for them to begin to figure out what's worth keeping, how they too can be evangelists. Because I think a lot of times people get rooted in this idea that there's only one way to be, one way to do. And I think that if we are able to take some of the things that were meaningful, like unconditional love, and actually live them out and offer that space to people. I mean, growing up evangelical and having you all experienced this, like you spent all of your extra time with your community, right? You went to movies together. You ate at each other's houses. You found a beloved community. And a lot of the things that I think we grieve when we leave that is that sense of beloved community. But the way that I have found it is in, I do Friends everything, Friendsgiving, Friends Christmas, Friends blah, blah, blah. And that tradition of creating family, creating beloved community is something that I hold on to, that sense of unconditional love, that accountability, right? I mean, my friends and I share deeply with each other because we need to look out for one another. So I guess what I'm saying is like taking some of that stuff that was beautiful and rich and doing something new and beautiful with it. And not being sad about it.
Not being sad about, can you clarify that, Casey?
As if you're missing something.
Okay. Yeah, I think absolutely. I think that the traditions, they're not handed to us, or they haven't been preserved over the span of time to be cyclical entirely, where it's just, we go through motions. They're meant to carry us along a journey, like an epic spiritual journey. And when they stop doing that for us, then we have to make them new. We don't have a choice. It's like either get stuck in the mud or you actually do something completely different and new with it. And I think Jesus, for those of us who do identify as Christians and who have picked Jesus as like our teacher, our guru, he was a great model of that.
I think he was a great model of that. And I also think that it's a tradition, the tradition that Jesus came from, right? So when I everything that I've studied and learned about ancient Judaism is that was the way, the mode was to reinvent the tradition so that it was applicable to that current generation, right? Like the whole central focus when there was a gathering, when rabbis discussed and talked, was to question, right? And the posture of apology is, I'm giving you this so that you have no questions. And that's another thing that I think we miss, is that questions disrupt, and we don't want to be disrupt, because disrupt is there's not a peace to it. But what we're doing is we're accepting a superficial peace, right? A comfort that isn't real, that doesn't last, because there's no dynamic, right? Like, so I think I'm going back to my old days as a youth pastor, worship leader, is that I hated it when someone, and this is why I really have a hard time just in church in general, especially more traditional churches, is because there's no dynamic to the music of hymns, right? It's like, here's the thing, but I want that build, right? Like I want that piano, I want the drums to kick in, I want like all the dynamics, I want to go up and down, because there's movement and freedom with that. So I think that it's just Jesus, obviously it's Jesus, and we all believe in him and stuff, but I also think it's that the mode in which Jesus lived, that tradition that somehow we lost with like a Western mentality to Christianity that compartmentalizes, and there's this underlining thing that we're all searching for, the one truth, the one way. Like we've misconstrued the whole like one way of Jesus into this like one way to be in the world, and that's crippled us in so many ways.
So Jeff, the 1-3 doesn't work for you?
The 1-3.
The beat on 1, beat on 3. The rhythm of the hymns.
No, it does not.
You need some 2-4 in your life.
I need some 2-4. I need it. I need some rhythm. I need to be at a rock concert. I know everyone says that like as a diminishing thing, but rock concerts are awesome and they're a lot of fun. So, there's nothing wrong with that. That's right. That's right.
That's where the people are.
No one's buying a ticket to listen to some lousy ass hymn, No. No offense to anyone.
Like they have these, beautiful churches with gorgeous pipe organs that cost way too much, and there's homeless people outside, and you've got 20 people that'll show up to hear that pipe organ concert.
Right. And it's beautiful, but it's like, let's throw in some variety here, and I don't know.
Yeah. And to me, it's such a symbol of colonialism. occupation and dominance. Because a lot of times when people came in to occupy land that belonged to other people, they would actually cart in on a wagon or something a pipe organ and set it up as a way to say, we're here, we're immovable, we're not going anywhere. So,
that's kind of how my heart feels when I step into situations like they've colonized my soul.
right.
Yeah, and Jeff, back to what you were saying, and Raj, I mean, I think this totally fits. Jesus comes from a tradition where you were allowed to question and wonder and change the meaning of the story, right? We come from a tradition that created creeds that burned people at the stake for not believing them, you know?
Yeah.
And so along with the organ came a document where you had to profess a faith that was not yours. And I think that we are in a space and in a time where we have to begin to ask ourselves real questions about, are we willing to carry the organ and creeds forward? I hope not.
I mean, is there in the history of the Jesus movement, is there a clear point where we went from the rabbinic midrash tradition to dogmatic orthodoxy?
There isn't just one Jesus movement. That's what's remarkable about early Christianity. It's like early Christianities.
Right.
That's right. Yep.
And like right from the beginning, right from the very beginning, it was already spreading around the world. And people made it theirs.
Right.
But I would say in terms of like tradition, I would say it's probably the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, right? Where it became a primarily Gentile, Western Greek mode of thought within the church, because most of the Judaism was spread throughout the empire. I mean, that was probably the biggest movement in terms of Christianity going from rooted in Judaism and Eastern thought into Western.
Yeah. Yeah, the stuff that flowed through Rome is what we know in the United States as Christianity. Right.
Well, I mean, for how many decades of centuries of the church were we still interpreting Jesus through a Greek lens and not a Jewish lens? Right. I feel like it wasn't until like Rudolf Bultmann in the early 1900s that we really paved the way for the Jesus seminar and how we look at Jesus today in terms of biblical scholarship. I mean, there's some great work that Will Gaffney does on white supremacy and how we do biblical scholarship now that has only been deconstructed in the last 50 years maybe. And that was letting into by a lot of other stuff. So how we've looked at Jesus through a Western thought for most of the theology that built our denominations and our churches, right? Like Martin Luther and John Calvin and all these, I don't know.
Well, but like, Bonnie was saying, there is a Southern church and an Eastern church where those theologies and traditions did not flow through Rome. And, they're still around today.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an Eastern, the Eastern Orthodox tradition, which split from Rome, the Roman tradition, a long time ago. And a lot of the theology is quite different and continues to be different. So
the Gnostic Gospels.
Yeah, which was considered heresy by the Roman Church.
Yeah, and the Thomasines in India.
Well,
Right.
we should do an episode on Gnosticism because
we totally should.
I'm not necessarily in disagreement with that one, but we'll save that for another episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then my question is, are we demonizing an apologetic approach to anything? Like, is it ever appropriate? Is there a time where we do need to say, this is it, build some walls and say, this has to be this way?
Yeah, I had that same question. I think it's interesting that we've been talking about baptism, and even though we've talked about how it might be made new in some new form, it's still baptism.
Yep.
So I think, which comes, from the Jewish tradition, the mikvah. Actually, it was remade in a Christian form from the Jewish tradition. So I think it's Hannah Arendt who wonders about Christianity and whether or not it can be institutionalized. She thinks about it in relation to government and politics. And she says, really, in order for it to be Christianity, it has to always be outside of the institution. As soon as it becomes institutionalized or structured, it's no longer Christianity, at least not the Christianity of Jesus. But I don't think you can't pass on a tradition without a structure. So I don't know. What do y'all think?
Well, I hope we do an episode on pluralism one day, because this ties into that idea. But that question, Jeff, there's a phrase which I'd have to unpack in another place and time. But it's the phrase is roots down, walls down. And a friend of mine who's an Episcopalian priest was sharing this that comes from a bishop. He's from the Church of England, is in the Bay Area now, and was talking about this idea that if you are rooted in your tradition, you can then let your walls down and be in full relationship with others because you have a distinct identity, a distinct rootedness in a tradition and faith practice that is yours, that is personal and communal. Whereas others may be in relationship but without a sense of identity, and that doesn't particularly lead to anything very special. I mean, that's one line of thinking. So having some rootedness, I think, is critical to human flourishing, whether it be in particularly a religious construct, but I think as human beings, we have to have a place that where we center ourselves.
Have you ever thought about who you would be as a spiritual being without your evangelical fundamentalist roots?
That's like a youth group game, right? Like, what would you be if you weren't a Christian? And everyone says a stripper, or like, right? Because we've attached this certain morality to being a Christian, and I think I'm at a place now where the more I think about it, I don't know if much would be different. Maybe the words would be different, but there's still, there's nothing in. I don't know. Maybe my Christian upbringing gave me a place to express that, but maybe I just would have been an activist or in a nonprofit, a quote unquote secular nonprofit organization, and nothing else much would have changed. Because the more I think about it, it's like, well, just because I don't believe in Jesus doesn't mean I want to go like on a murderous rampage or a sexcapade or whatever, that slippery slope mentality. Yeah, so I don't know.
Well, I'd be Hindu. I probably wouldn't be. I maybe it wouldn't be that different in my outlook and moral compass, etc. But I wouldn't be Christian.
Casey, what would you be?
Stripper. Yeah. Look, many of the strippers I know love Jesus. Okay, so we can't go there.
Amen.
I would probably find myself hanging out with Emerson, right? I would probably be a humanist, someone who is deeply devoted to social justice, but is able to connect with the divine through the rising and setting of the sun. That's probably where I would end up.
Don't you do that now, though?
I didn't want to say that.
No, but I think you're very connected to appreciating beauty in the natural world.
And that's what and that's sort of one and the same for me. You know what I mean? Like, I think that as my faith has progressed over the last, 12 years or something, that it comes more and more to that place. My experience of God and Jesus are found in people and creation and less in institutions.
Amen.
Yeah.
I'm right on the line with you. I'm very much a humanist and a materialist. Like, that's where I would land every time. I just happen to have Christian words to describe it, but
that's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. And I don't think it has to be either or.
No, not
I don't
at all.
Either. No, and so, but if you're asking me the question of where I would have ended up, I mean, it's where I am now, I think, which just with language, just Jesus language,
I think if I didn't have that tradition that I grew up in, I would be completely lost. I would just the possibilities of what's out there and available would have probably overwhelmed me completely. and I would have found like nothing without something, and this is probably also my Enneagram number, without something to push against, I wouldn't have been able to form a spiritual identity at all. At least that's what I think.
You need an arch nemesis. You need an apologist to push against.
Having known you for 30 some years, you would have found something to push against.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not just push against though. It's sort of like, here's what I have to give you. Here's an offering that you can take and do something with. And if I didn't have something like that to work with, I don't know. I think I would be envious of people who did.
That's really interesting. I'm going back to now that this might be like a totally like way off side, whatever. But, Raj, you mentioned that you'd be Hindu, I wonder if even if I didn't like have the rooted tradition in evangelical Christianity would still be my tradition because it's white. Like it's a white institution, the way that we look at it. Even if I said, well, I wouldn't be Christian, I'd be an atheist. Right. Atheism, I think, is a white institution because it comes from academia, which, been dominated by white people.
Western academia.
Right. Western academia. Yeah, for sure. And the expression of academia and Christianity that we've all been exposed to are through our education and everything like that. And I wonder, how much of that informs, like, it's just there. It's just part of, like, there's no, any other option for me would be appropriation, right? Like, man, and now I got like all this stuff to think about. I don't.
Well, Gandhi says to be Indian is to be Hindu. It doesn't matter what your flavor is. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, I when I go back to India and spend time in, the church in the village where my dad was born and they currently live, my mom and dad, and where I was born nearby, that's some Hindu stuff, man. I mean, we're talking about Jesus. We're praying to Jesus. We use the Trinity as a construct, but it's very imbued with Hindu sensibilities, and it's beautiful because Hindu tends to have that Will Rogers quote, Hinduism never met a god it didn't like. So you've got Rama, Shiva, Durga, and Jesus.
Well, the opposite is true for us, is that white Christians never met a God they didn't hate. So
right, that's right. Right. That is so true. That's right.
And so it's really cool to worship in India in just about any context. But you've got Hindu fundamentalists too, who, are set on murder and cleansing and that kind of crap.
Right. So where do we end this? What are our closing thoughts? Where do we want to encourage people to go?
We've been like kind of circling around the apologist thing, right?
We have.
What's the evangelist part? What's the good news, people? How do we make that manifest?
Yeah, I think it's to me it feels like there's something new emerging. And maybe that has been the experience of everybody in time, but the way that spirit is moving right now, especially in the United States, it feels like something new is emerging. And so maybe now this is a time when the evangelists that are out there, now's the time for them to get into their places and do their work. And perhaps on down the road, it's a time for the apologists who are out there to get in their places and do their work. So yeah, call out to all evangelists. Spread the good news.
And I would just qualify that a little bit by saying, when I read scripture, every major movement into a new era is marked by judgment. And I think that when we talk about judgment the way that we do, we get to that American ideal of, well, don't you judge me? Like, who are you to judge? All that kind of stuff. But all judgment is, from a biblical standpoint, is a revealing, right? Like an uncovering. Look at, this is what's here. Like the prophets weren't like fortune tellers. They were sociologists. They look at the landscape and they said, this is what I see. I'm seeing what's in front of me, what's here and now. Jesus wasn't a fortune teller. He was saying, this is the movement. This is the kingdom. We're here and now. And it's always marked by judgment, a revealing of what's already there and what's changing and what's evolving. And I think it's just embracing ultimate reality. Like, right? Like not clinging on to the past and not holding on to this false sense of what our ideal of the future is, but being fully present and immersed here and being able to appreciate all that's bubbling up and what it has the potential to become.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that you all have talked about the Enneagram tonight, so I think I should finally jump in here with this, right? But I think that is the root of how we confront ourselves. We can't continue to tell ourselves the stories of our past because it leaves us stuck, right? And we can't move into the future only focused on the future without recognizing what is happening right in front of us. We have to be present in this moment, for better or for worse, right? We have to consent to what is. And I think that in some ways, getting to the place of recognizing what is allows us to offer good news. But we have to be able to confront what is.
Yeah, I think for me, it's I really like the notion, we're wired for survival, we're worthy of love is great. But I know that's going to ride that for a while. And it'll always be part of sort of the history of my spiritual evolution. It's not something that's going to last into the future in perpetuity. I can already see that, but it's going to take me a long way. So I'm not a surfer, never have been. I didn't swim. I still don't really know how to swim. But when I was back east, when Bonnie lived near the coast, I bought a boogie board and, would go out. It's not very deep on the eastern shore of Maryland. And I remember the first wave that I caught, it was like, I don't know, I was transported into another realm of joy and exhilaration. And then everything else was like about catching another wave, just like that one. And I can't, maybe I never have, really caught one. And California is just too scary. The waves are really big and it's deep and there's, and sharks.
Cold.
And it's so cold. But it's, theologically, it's kind of, there's some parallels for me. It's like every now and then a swell will come along and I get swept up in it. And it's like, whoa, I'm transported to this new realm of reality. And so, fortunately, the waves keep churning. The ocean is powerful and the waves they're always coming. They're always there. So I think as far as evangelism goes, that's sort of what I'm shouting from the mountaintops right now. Is I get it. You're wired for love. You do some crazy stuff to survive, but you're also worthy of love.
Right. Those are good thoughts. This is a good conversation. I wish we were in the car with you next time we all need to take a road trip and bring the recorder and get all this on tape. On tape. I just said tape. I just revealed my age.
And tape and listen to hymns.
Yeah.
I'll bring the organ.
There. Little Casio. Let us know what you think. Add your voice to this particular conversation by commenting on the show notes at Irenicast.com/137. And also in the show notes, you'll find relevant links and a complete list of all the other ways to follow, like, and contact the show. That's Irenicast.com/137. On the other side of the music, we're going to be talking about music, Christian music to be exact, and songs that we may feel a little embarrassed that we still like from our former way. Things that we will not apologize for, that we will defend to the death, and hide behind our walls of insecurity. So on the other side of the music, this is going to be fun. I am a sucker for lists. Top 10. At the end of the year is my favorite time of year because it's all the top this of 2018 and top this. So this is probably one of my favorite segments because it's a revealing segment. We're all saying these are top 3 of whatever category that we're looking into. And this one in particular is guilty pleasure songs, Christian songs that we used to listen to. Because I'm sure at some point we were all heavily involved and maybe even burned our old secular CDs and one of those, burned.
I did that.
Yeah.
So these are all, and then, you're left with just the stuff that's left over. So let's just get into this. Okay. So we'll do it like we normally do it. We'll all give our 3, we'll all give our 1, and then we'll reveal our top, our 3, 2, 1, all that kind of stuff. So, this is hard, but Casey, let's start with you because you're the one I'm most curious about.
Blessed Be Your Name by Matt Redman.
Ooh. I prefer the Blessed Be Your Name by Tree 63. Remember them? They were kind of like they had that little sting sound to them a little bit. But yeah, Blessed Be Your Name.
Do we go all give our number threes?
We'll all give our number 3. Yeah. So
Okay.
any comments on Casey's number 3? Anyone? No connection to that? When I picked up my guitar a few months ago, just because playing, it was the first worship song I played on that guitar. Was Blessed Be Your Name.
See,
so
there you go.
All right, Raj, how about you?
That's deep. All right. My number 3 Christian song that I'm embarrassed that I still enjoy is DC-10 by Audio Adrenaline. Love that song. If you're laying on the ground all messy and dead. I love that song. It still jams.
Nice.
It's like basically you go to heaven or you go to hell.
Right. That I think our number 3s are on the same wavelength, so I can't wait to share that. Bonnie, what about you?
My songs are like songs that we would sing like at camp or in congregational singing. So my number 3 is I've Been Redeemed. Do you know that song? I've been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb.
Yeah, I love that.
Oh,
one.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
I've been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb.
You can talk about me.
I've been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb.
This is
Raj
triggering
has
for
a new
people.
singing career.
That's right. Where's the piano time, man? You gotta bust that out.
Yeah, that would be great.
All right. So my number 3 is Breakfast by the Newsboys.
Oh, the Newsboys.
Do you remember that song where like it's this really fun song about breakfast cereal, but the context is
sure
you're gonna go to hell.
Right.
Like it's the worst song in the world. Like
make your choices.
Right. When you like take the juxtaposition of what they're talking about and how fun they're making it, it's horrible, but I still love it. I will still listen to it.
Oh yeah.
That's just a catchy beat about people going to hell. It's awesome. So that's my number 3. Casey, number 2.
Third Day, God of Wonders.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Third Day.
I honestly still listen to the Third Day Offering album like all the time. Yeah.
I'm there with you on that one for sure.
I'm getting like physical reactions, like flashback reactions.
Yep.
There was the God of Wonders, they did it on that Offering CD, right? And they did Offerings too. And I remember the one thing that I wanted to hear the whole time was I wanted to hear Mac Powell and Jennifer Knapp sing on the same song. And I'm pretty sure on one of those CDs, it wasn't one of the Third Day CDs, but it was one of those compilation CDs that Mac Powell and Jennifer Knapp did a song together. Jennifer Knapp, former guest of the show. Thankfully, I can still enjoy her music and not feel.
Yeah, she's
guilty.
amazing.
Absolutely.
She's amazing.
See, I don't feel any guilt listening to her stuff.
No.
No, not at all.
It's so good.
All
And,
right.
I'm still waiting for that introduction, Jeff.
Me too, Jeff.
We'll see what we can do. All right, Raj, number 2.
Number 2, DC Talk. Remember them?
Oh, I remember DC Talk.
They did a remake of Jesus Is Just All Right.
Yeah, I remember that song.
It was good. It was good.
You still listen to it?
Yes.
Okay.
I do.
All right, Bonnie, number 2.
It's funny because when part of the deconstruction was burning all the Christian CDs, so we had to buy some of them again or download them. My number 2 is I Could Only Imagine by Mercy.
Oh my God, that should be on my list. That should totally. I sang that in church recently.
I just put that on repeat sometimes.
Yeah.
And just play
Yes,
it again.
me too.
But I'm not embarrassed of listening to that one anymore.
Well,
I mean,
Did you
I am.
see the movie? Then you might be
But
embarrassed.
I don't know. It's
Bonnie,
just such a
I
pretty
love that song.
It's such a good song.
yeah.
Ooh.
I want it to
Theological-
be true.
Yeah,
It's
theologically I have trouble
tragic,
with it,
but it's
right?
so good.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So how many people burned their CDs at some point or broke them or whatever?
I ended up throwing mine
Yeah,
out.
definitely.
So what was the first secular CD you bought back? What was the first one you backslid to?
Tim McGraw everywhere.
Oh, no, Casey.
Yes.
I'm so sad that you listened to that.
The first secular CD that I went back to.
You better tell the truth about this, Raj.
I think it was a Red Hot Chili Peppers album.
I think it was Van Halen.
No, that's when I trash stuff. I had mostly Van Halen albums, but then a couple of years later, didn't want to reconnect with them as badly as I wanted to reconnect with early Red Hot Chili Peppers. But yeah, no, Van Halen rocks. Their first Van Halen 1, Van Halen 2 are still great albums. They hold up. Diver Down, not so much.
Our ratings are dropping as we're speaking.
Hey, you don't even know those albums, do you?
No, sir.
Like Running with the Devil. You Google Running with the Devil and listen to that song. That's a great rock and roll song.
It's a great song. Van Halen, you can't go wrong with Van Halen.
Yeah. Well, the later stuff is crap, but
not
unless
all of it,
you're a
but some of
feminist.
it. Well,
Running with the Devil's not an anti-feminist song.
Okay, well, I think we're supposed to. Are we staying on this?
Yeah, sorry. We should get back on track. My number 2 is same artist as Casey.
I'm embarrassed I'm defending Van Halen.
Third Day, and it was a song from their third album called Believe. Like, talk about apologetics, but it was like this bluesy southern rock song that I just played over and over and like sang at the top of my lungs in my car up until last week. So
Yeah.
yes, it's a good one. Third Day, they were my favorite
Third Day is good.
They were my favorite. Yeah. So my final song is from my other favorite band that when they got some airtime in the secular world, I was devastated. And that is Switchfoot.
Oh, I know what song you're going to say.
Dare You to Move.
Yes.
Is still one of my most favorite songs.
I still love Switchfoot. I'm not even guilty about it. Like, I think
Me too.
They just came out with a new album, and I like them still.
My older son Julian, who's 25 now, a friend of his bought a couple of tickets to a concert to take him to see Switchfoot, who was opening up for In Excess. And In Excess was one of my favorite bands, during their time. And, Julian, he has never really been really Christian. So after the show, I was like, oh, how was the show? He's like, man, it was great. In Excess was fantastic. I was like, didn't you go to see Switchfoot? He goes, yeah, they sucked.
Oh, hey now. I love them. So my first concert ever was a Switchfoot concert. And they were opening for Supertones and Reliant K.
I love the OC Supertones. And
I remember liking them the best because they at that time were the most religious. Like, they were the ones who were responsible for the altar call, and not knowing that it was all set up, right? I thought it was spirit led. So I was super devastated when in high school they came out with, these secular songs. And the local radio station had him on, and they asked him, like, who are some influences in your life? And someone said Bob Marley. I don't even remember who. And I just remember feeling so betrayed, And now if someone was like, so who's one of your favorite artists? I'd be like, Bob Marley. So it's an interesting full circle.
But you mean, Casey, marketing and business meetings aren't spirit-led?
What are you talking about?
No, they are not.
The whole strategy of the altar call and seeing people coming over.
Right.
Brilliant.
Nice. Raj, what's your number 1?
Oh, my God. I was hoping you'd skip me. I'm actually legit embarrassed to share this.
Oh, this is going to be good.
Because it's one that if it comes on the radio and I'm alone, I will turn it up and sing. Higher by Creed.
Oh,
yes.
Oh,
oh my God, I love that song.
I'm with you on that. And some might make the argument, well, they weren't Christian, but Scott Stapp.
Oh, yes, they were. Come on.
He had a solo Christian album. But I will say this: my favorite band of all time right now, no legit, is a band called Ultra Bridge, and it's basically all the band members from Creed with the greatest rock singer, like top 10 rock singers of all time, in Miles Kennedy. They're really good. You should check them out.
Okay.
Alter Bridge, amazing. And Miles Kennedy, he does some stuff with Slash that's really good. Anyway, I'm getting off track, but higher, Creed. At least you didn't say Nickelback, but I guess that really wouldn't fit in the...
Nickelback, I never liked Nickelback, please. Give me a little more credit.
All right, Bonnie, number one.
My number one is a hymn. The blood will never lose its power.
Oh.
I don't think I know that one.
What?
What?
Yeah.
I've never even heard that
Blood
song.
Jesus shed.
It's a hymn.
for
It's like a,
me.
yeah.
Way. I'm off key there.
I don't know that
Back on Calvary.
Oh my god.
You don't know this song?
I mean, it sounds like a hymn, but
I don't know.
I feel like Raj is trying to get his
Today.
singing career started.
I've never sang in public before this podcast.
That is true.
I thought you were like
Fuck.
a musician, songwriter.
Yeah, I was sort of in that producer realm, kind of in the shadows.
Composer, producer.
Yeah, sort of a director, producer, and accompanied really great talent.
Oh, okay. I see.
But I will sing that song whenever I am sad,
Mhm.
whenever I feel like the world is falling apart, and I will sing it loudly.
But you're not embarrassed though.
The blood will never lose its power. The blood that Jesus shed on Calvary. Yeah, I'm a little embarrassed
But he
because
did.
I don't think
did shed
Jesus
it for
died
you,
for
Bonnie.
me. So.
No, he didn't die for you. He died because of you and your sins.
Right.
That's
Let
much
us
better.
never forget.
Oh, that's good.
Fortunately, I'm covered in the blood.
Right. Oh my God.
Carrie,
I love
good
that song.
movie.
How about you, Jeff? What's your number one?
My number one, and I can't help but bob my head to this one every time I hear it. It's Shackles by Mary Mary. You remember that song?
I don't know that one.
Oh, if
I
you
don't
heard
know
it,
that
you
one.
know it. If you
Yeah?
heard it, you know it.
Okay.
I'm not going to sing it because I'm not as brave as you, Raj.
Come on,
but,
dude. Sing it. Give us a bar. Give us
no,
a
does
measure.
anyone know what I'm talking about? I'm
Of
looking at
course.
faces here. No
How
one
does it
knows.
go?
don't.
Shackles,
I don't.
shackles. How does it go?
Exactly. Just like that. Shackles,
Oh,
shackles.
come on.
It's take these shackles off my feet so I can praise him.
Nope. Don't
it's
know
this-
that
Don't
one.
know it.
Oh, really? It's this R&B female group, kind of like the Christian version of Destiny's Child. No one? No one?
Mm-mm.
Oh my gosh!
I'll have to look it up.
Look it
I
up
think
because
you,
I
I think
guarantee.
you should play it in the podcast.
We'll have to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, we can't do that unfortunately because we're on
No.
Spotify. They're pretty well in
You
general,
get
but
you get 7 seconds, right?
no, that's a myth. I mean, technically, if we talked about it for 10 minutes, we could call it fair use, but the burden of proof is on us. So if someone sued us, we'd have to
That's
pay
fine.
all the bills and
So
everything. And
Google them.
yeah, I'll put it in the show notes. There's got to be someone who's listening right now that's very upset, like me, that no one knows.
There's
Shackles
thousands of
by
people
Mary
across
Mary.
I think
the
I
country,
do. I
Jeff,
think I do
shaking
know
their
it.
head
I
going,
actually now I'm starting to think
We don't know.
I do know it.
I know a
Take
couple of
these
people named
shackles
Mary,
off
but
my
I've never
feet
heard
so
of
I
Mary
can
Mary.
dance.
There you go. That's the
Just
one.
Yeah.
Casey,
Casey,
you
you
got
got
it.
it.
Casey.
Uh-oh.
Just want to praise him.
That's the
Yeah.
one.
Uh-oh.
Yes, I do know it now.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Whew. I knew. I
Wow.
thought for sure,
Muscle
Casey, you got
memory.
to know
How
that.
quickly my brain was able to recall that.
Right?
Wow.
It's that's one of my favorites right there. I'd still listen to that, and because there wasn't that was one thing going into Christian realm. Like there was a lot of really good, like I don't know, white music, like rock and pop and stuff like that. But I never found a good replacement for like Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg.
That's
and
right.
like
Because there isn't.
there is not. Like all the good hip hop that I used to listen to that I broke and burnt, I could never find a good replacement for.
DC Talk wasn't cutting it for you.
No, not even close.
MC Hammer did a religious song. One
All of
on
his
every
songs,
album.
all of his albums had some sort of religious song to it until he tried to be all gangster with what was it, Bumps and the something. Where you just,
I don't know.
it
No,
was-
I mean, MC Hammer doesn't compare with the others on your list.
no, not at all. Like I would like Nas and like Run DMC, like all this stuff I just never found. There was never anything good. The closest thing was this group called Gospel Gangstas. Does anyone remember them?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that'll do it for us
That's
this
what we
week.
should call ourselves. We
What?
should just call ourselves gospel gangsters.
Yeah.
That might be.
Have you seen our picture?
Oh my goodness. It's good stuff. All right. That's going to do it for us this week. How can everyone find y'all? Casey, how can people find you on the interwebs?
Yep, you can check out thequeerlyfaithfulpastor.com. I'm also on Instagram as the Queerly Faithful Pastor, or you can check me out on Twitter at Rev Tenen or Facebook as Casey Tenen.
Raj, how about you?
Facebook.com/Rev Raj Rambob.
Rev Raj Rambob. That's what's that called? Where it's a bunch of R's in a row or a bunch
Alliteration.
of the same alliteration. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Bonnie, how about you?
You can find me on Facebook as Bonnie Lang Rambob or at Parkside Community Church in Sacramento.
Very nice. And as for me, you can follow me on all the socials at Jeff Manildi and listen on the second and fourth Thursday of every month to my other podcast, Divine Cinema, where we review movies of faith, good and bad. As for Irenicast, don't forget to subscribe to the show and never miss an episode. We're available on all major podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and many more. And while you're there, if your platform allows it, leave us a rating and or review. We're always looking for more and more ways to hear from you. And speaking of ratings and reviews, we had one recently from New Age Sensitive. I like that name. On Apple Podcasts. I listened to your episode on poverty. You guys really get what's going on out there. A real Christian is liberal and believes in sharing like you do. I love you and I love the podcast. Keep doing this. I beg you. So thank you, New Age Sensitive. That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you very much.
We appreciate it. That's a 5-star rating from Apple Podcasts. So
Nice.
if you are so inclined, give us your review and rating and let us know how much you love us, and we will we'll read it on the show. So for this week, I'm Jeff.
I'm Bonnie.
I'm Casey.
This is Raj.
Thanks for joining the conversation.